Alright guys, today we need to talk about something that's been blowing up in the Genshin community lately, the Columbina leaks. Yeah, I know, we've seen her name pop up before, but this time it's not just concept art or lore speculation. What's making waves now are her actual kit leaks, and the reaction from the community has been, let's just say, chaotic. People are hyped, confused, worried, and already making memes about it. And before I dive in, just a reminder, all of this comes from leaks. That means nothing is final. Things can change in beta, numbers can get rebalanced, skills can get reworked. But even with that disclaimer, if what we're seeing ends up being even half true, Columbina could completely shake up how we look at Nodcry teams and maybe even the reaction system as a whole. Save up to 25% on the current banners at lootbar.gg, especially for the Nodcry release. Lootbar is offering the all-in-one pack and the 6,480 pack for only $69 compared to $100 in-game. That's a $31 saving. I just entered my UID and selected my server. In less than 5 minutes, the gems appeared in my account. As you can see, I received double the amount for my first purchase, just like with in-game top-ups. And remember, the double bonus for your first purchase has been reset in 6.0. Beyond Genshin, you can also top up in Honkai Star Rail. Lootbar has over 100,000 satisfied users, and also supports PS5 and Xbox top-ups. New users can get an extra 10% discount, while returning users get 5%. The link is in the description. The big headline is this: Columbina looks like one of those hybrid characters that Hoyoverse seems to love experimenting with. At Constellation Zero, her baseline kit seems very support-focused. She's not designed to immediately be your main damage dealer. Instead, she's looking like an enabler. According to the leaks, she can trigger all the Lunar reactions by herself. Normally, you'd have to stack your team with other Nodcry characters to make that happen. But Columbina? She apparently does it solo. That alone is huge, because it means she could open up a ton of flexibility for people who want to experiment with the new reaction system without being forced into very narrow team comps. And then we get to the buffs. The leaks describe them as, quote, terrifying buffs. That phrase alone has already become a meme. People are joking like, what is this? Plus 1,000% crit damage if your brother is on the team. Obviously not literal, but it captures the mood. Excitement mixed with anxiety. Because when Hoyoverse drops phrases like terrifying buffs, players immediately start wondering if they're about to release another power creep monster. Now, her burst is what really caught my attention, and a lot of people's too. The description immediately got compared to Nahida's burst. Supposedly, Columbina creates a field that empowers both allies and reactions. If you've played with Nahida, you already know how insane that kind of effect can be. Her burst basically defines her role as a must-have support, because it gives your whole team a consistent area of effect buff that just makes everything flow. If Columbina is getting something similar, a team-wide field that persists and amplifies reactions, that's massive. It makes me wonder, are they really going to give her the same sort of Archon-style field ability? Because historically, that's one of the strongest design archetypes in Genshin. Nahida's burst turned her from just another Dendro applier into an Archon-level staple. If Columbina's burst ends up being even half that strong, we could be looking at a unit that entire teams are built around. But things get tricky once you start looking at her constellations. The leaks say that starting around C2, Columbina shifts from being a pure support into a main DPS. And by main DPS, I don't just mean she does a little more damage. I mean she becomes the on-field carry, the one doing the bulk of your team's damage output. Her scaling supposedly ramps up massively as you unlock those constellations. Sounds amazing, right? Well, here's the catch. Her effectiveness is tied to how many Nodcry characters you run alongside her. The more you have in your party, the stronger she becomes. That's where things get controversial. On one hand, it rewards players for building around her faction. On the other hand, it also feels restrictive. If you don't want to commit to multiple Nodcry characters, you might never unlock her true DPS potential. And for free-to-play or low-spending players, that's a nightmare. Because suddenly it's not just about pulling Columbina. You're looking at investing in a whole group of characters just to get the most out of her. People are already calling it locked by quantity. It's a design choice that reminds players of what happened with characters like Neuvillette and Furina back in Fontaine. Individually, they were strong, but together they pushed the limits of balance. The difference here is that instead of one synergy partner, Columbina might need an entire roster to really shine. Now let's talk about one of the biggest talking points. There's no Lunar Vaporize. Ever since Lunar reactions were teased, a lot of people were expecting we'd get a Lunar version of Vaporize. And honestly, that would have been insane if it worked like traditional vape scaling. But the leaks say Columbina doesn't provide it. She still boosts other Lunar reactions. She still offers buffs, but Lunar vape specifically, not happening. And people are split about this. Some are disappointed, saying it's a wasted opportunity. Others are relieved because it prevents Pyro teams from getting even more favoritism. Let's be real, Pyro has been sitting comfortably at the top of the meta for a long time. So part of the community is glad we're not just turbocharging Pyro again. But it does feel a little weird that one of the most iconic reaction archetypes is deliberately missing. One of the details I think is being slept on is her resistance shred. Apparently, Columbina reduces all elemental resistances by 15%, and the kicker is that she counts as a Hexensal member. Just by existing, she applies that shred. And if you pair her with other Hexensal characters, you can stack even more. That's huge. Think about how powerful resistance shred is in Genshin. Right now, the Viridescent Venerer set is king when it comes to resistance debuffing, but it only works for certain elements. If Columbina can shred all elements universally, that's potentially game-changing. People are even speculating that this could power creep Viridescent into irrelevance. Maybe that's a stretch, but the concern makes sense. Resistance shred multiplies all your other damage sources, so giving that to an entire team, across every element, is no small thing. Zooming out for a second, it's clear Columbina fits a very familiar pattern. I like to call it the Archon playbook. Look at characters like Nahida, Raiden, Farina. They all launched as support-heavy at Constellation 0, but once you start investing into constellations, they become monstrous main DPS characters. The leaks for Columbina sound almost identical. At C0, she's a strong support with a team-wide field and reaction enabling. At higher constellations, she turns into a DPS powerhouse, but only if you're willing to spend and build around her. It's a formula that's worked for Hoyoverse before, so it makes sense they'd repeat it here, especially for a character as important as one of the top 3 harbingers. So how's the community reacting? Honestly, it's a mixed bag. Some players are super hyped, already calling her the Archon-level meta centerpiece of Nodcry. They're excited for the potential flexibility she brings, especially with Lunar reactions. But others are frustrated. They're worried she's going to be too locked behind expensive constellations and very specific team comps. For free-to-play players, that's discouraging, because it feels like she's being designed primarily for whales. And then, of course, we've got the memes. Terrifying buffs is already a community-wide joke. Scaramouche mains are latching onto lines about his boost not being high and treating it as ultimate cope fuel. Albedo mains are making fun of Duran's constellation for being too self-centered. And somehow, Columbina keeps getting dragged into those conversations too. It's funny, but it also reflects the underlying anxiety in the community. People are nervous about Hoyoverse doubling down on hyper-specific, whale-heavy builds that casual players can't really take advantage of. So, what's the takeaway here? Columbina is shaping up to be another support-first character with the potential to scale into a monster DPS at higher constellations. She brings unique tools like Universal Resistance Shred, the ability to trigger all Lunar reactions solo, and a potentially Archon tier burst. But at the same time, her full potential seems locked behind both constellations and faction-specific synergy. And that's why the community is so split. On one side, excitement. On the other, frustration. At the end of the day, though, remember, these are still leaks. Until things show up in beta, and even then until final release, numbers and mechanics can always change. But the direction she's going in feels clear. She's meant to be a high-impact, faction-defining character that pushes Nodcry into the spotlight. And that's everything we know so far about Columbina's leaked kit. But now I want to hear from you guys. Do you think she's going to end up being the next must-pull Archon-level unit? Or is this just another case of overhyped leaks? Drop your thoughts down below. I'll be reading through the comments. And of course, if you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay updated on more leaks, lore deep dives, and meta discussions, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot more to cover as we get closer to the next patch, and trust me, You won't want to miss it. Save up to 25% on current banners at lootbar.gg. Links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.